Hi everybody, good afternoon. Mina Rizuki, Nicky Bandini here with us to talk about Lukaku in a bit. With us for the moment, Nabeid Haroun, Olivia Bizaglo and James Savundra too. We're going to start with Manchester United. With 3 days to go, they could sign a midfielder. They have made initial contacts, we're told, for the conditions of a deal for Tottenham midfielder Pierre-Emile Højbjerg after they were offered the chance to speak to the player. Other options include Fiorentina's Sofian Amrabat and Bayern Munich's Ryan Gravenberch. There is still a chance there won't be any major outfield incomings between now and the deadline. So is Højbjerg one that they've targeted because he can go in and fit in straight away? Well,
he's been a regular first-team starter in the Premier League since 2016, so that transition will be relatively easy. He also fits into the pattern of being a player who's worked with Erik ten Hag before, albeit a long time ago when he was a teenager. Funds are limited at Manchester United, so it's a deal that, despite it being a shock when it first emerged, does make a lot of sense for both clubs, with Spurs looking to offload some players as well. One thing he offers, defensive intensity, extremely hard-working as well. But one thing Erik ten Hag has spoken about before is wanting Manchester United to be the best transitional side in the world. We can see some of his stats from last season. Pretty impressive when you rank him against other Premier League players. One thing I will say, though, is whilst his passes completed is pretty high, when you look at the big chances he created, just 5 last season in the Premier League. So one thing that Erik ten Hag likes a lot about Casemiro is his ability to break up play and then to launch attacks quickly, whereas Pierre-Emile Højbjerg doesn't quite have that in his game. He's not somebody who's going to cut the ball through an eye of a needle to create something for Rashford or Højlund eventually. So he's a safe passer, somebody who can keep things ticking over. I wonder if he's a bit too similar to Scott McTominay, so it feels like they're just bringing a body in if they were to sign Højbjerg. Christian Eriksen was used at the weekend, Mason Mount out injured, and he's somebody who's brilliant in possession but not so good when it comes to his defensive work, whereas Højbjerg is somebody who defensively will be pretty good for Manchester United. He's somebody who could work well alongside Casemiro, albeit I don't think from an assist point of view he's going to offer a huge amount. The one question I have would be why sell Fred for around £10 million, potentially bring in a player like Højbjerg for potentially more money. Very similar players, I think.
Could you argue, though, James, that someone like Ten Hag might just want one of his guys in, someone that he trusts a bit more, someone that he just feels like I get him through the door, and if I give him an instruction, he's going to listen to everything I say, because Højbjerg's been praised many times by ex-managers. It's not my knowledge, it's Dave's. He told me before we came on that other managers have said he listens and takes instructions on really well.
Yeah. I think you could be right. I think it has worked. I think when you look at his success rate with transfers so far, you have to back Erik ten Hag with the transfers he's made, pretty much all of them. I think Anthony, we saw at the weekend, showed signs that he could eventually be the player Manchester United want him to be. So I think there's something in that. I think when you look at United's midfield at the start of this season, that first game against Wolves, the balance wasn't right there at all. Mason Mount coming into the side, playing alongside Casemiro, but playing so far forward that Casemiro was isolated, and United were very lucky to get away with that. It does feel like United have learnt their lessons from that opening game. So I think it would make sense, and you do have to bear in mind United playing a number of different competitions this season, so we're not just looking at Højbjerg as a start in the Premier League. All other competitions, United do need depth, and they do need midfielder, having lost Fred.
I mean, what Nabeid was saying there, I mean, there's a couple of managers that have kind of earmarked Højbjerg as someone who will end up being a manager in the future, such is the way he thinks about the game and his intelligence on and off the pitch. So I think he's someone that managers who he's played for really, really like. Those passes, actually, and touches stats surprised me a little bit, because he was playing for essentially a counter-attacking team last season in Tottenham. So I was quite surprised to see those stats there. If he comes in, I mean, what does that mean for the United midfield as a whole?
Well, James mentioned it there. I think he could play with Casemiro or even without Casemiro. You know, Casemiro has looked better with each game, I think, and he started slow last season, but you still worry perhaps in the big games with Manchester United having Arsenal next, that will Casemiro on his own I know Christian Eriksen played a slightly deeper role in their game against Forest on the weekend. Obviously, he got his goal, but long-term, and especially against the bigger six sides, is that what Manchester United want? Like you say about Højbjerg, he sort of goes about his business quietly. He almost does that dirty work that not a lot of people recognise, but I suppose that's what you want from a player like him. And I think when you mentioned there Scott McTominay, I think it's probably more damning for him, really, that perhaps Erik ten Hag, like you say, is looking for a similar sort of player to come in and do a similar job to what Scott McTominay would be doing if he was playing for Manchester United. I think it just means that when everyone's fit, obviously Mason Mount isn't fit at the moment, but it looks like Erik ten Hag will probably want to play Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes and Mason Mount. But if that balance, if they can't quite get that right, then it feels like perhaps if Højbjerg does come in, you have to sacrifice one of Bruno Fernandes or Mason Mount. And by the looks of it, it would probably be Mason Mount that does get sacrificed. But going back to the Scott McTominay thing, there has been reports linking him with Bayern Munich. So imagine that, out of favour at Manchester United. Don't worry, I'll go and join Harry Kane and Bayern Munich.
Yeah, it would be an unbelievable move for him. I think from Tottenham's perspective, Tottenham fans' perspective as well, you know, I saw a few people saying that, you know, they wouldn't mind him going to Manchester United. But it feels unfortunate for Højbjerg that Tottenham have kind of almost moved on without him. I don't know whether that's unfair to say, given the fact that Basuma, Papsar have started the season so well, and they kind of fit more the progressiveness that Postecoglou is looking for. I remember in the Shakhtar pre-season friendly, there was the video of Postecoglou kind of throwing his arms up in the air because he was just a bit frustrated that Spurs weren't playing forward quick enough. And maybe that's kind of meant that Højbjerg's game of being more of a controller in that midfield doesn't quite marry in with that.
I think also with Basuma and Sarr, you've got two very dynamic midfielders, players that can carry the ball from deep areas forward. I think Ange loves players that can sort of get the ball into the forward areas as fast as possible. And like James said there, Højbjerg's probably not that guy. He's a high volume passer. He wants to keep it ticking. And interestingly, actually, towards the end of last season, occasionally you'd see him bombing on. I think there was the Europa League game where he sort of popped up out of nowhere against Marseille, ran the ball down the right side and then hit it across the keeper and scored out of nowhere. That's not really a trait of his. And so I think Ange's probably looked at the situation and gone, if I get Sarr and Basuma in there, we get the ball forward quicker into Son, Kulusevski, Richarlison. We could be more dynamic, we can press better. And unfortunately, there's always collateral damage that comes with that, which may be Højbjerg.
And they've got Skip and Bentancur as well. Bentancur's come back from a long-term injury. Was brilliant when he first signed for Spurs. I think it will, using the cliche, be like a new signing for them when he comes back into the picture. And Spurs are in a situation as well where I think they are looking to offload players. So I do think it was a complete shock when the news emerged, but it makes a lot of sense for Spurs because they can't register a number of players they've got in the squad, in that Premier League squad. And it makes sense for Man United because financially, they're in a situation where they couldn't compete for the likes of Lavia, they couldn't compete for the likes of Caicedo. So this is a low-risk option and someone who's played Premier League football the last 7 years.
Great point there. Staying with Manchester United, Dean Henderson's move to Crystal Palace, very, very close now to being finalised. Just to let you know, the fee understood to be in the region of £20 million. Once all done, United will then conclude a deal for Altay Bayindir from Fenerbahce. The fee for that around £4.3 million. United also remaining in the market to bring in a left-back. A loan deal for them is now the preferred option on that front. United short in that area. Both Luke Shaw, Tyrell Malacia out injured. Sky in Italy reporting that Roma's Leonardo Spinazzola is the latest option that they are looking at. Among the others they've looked at include Tottenham Sergio Reguilon and Chelsea's Marc Cucurella. So from looking at Cucurella in particular, would a fresh start for him be a good thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's clear that he's not first choice at Chelsea now. Ben Chilwell had such a brilliant pre-season and at the moment, with the formation that Mauricio Pochettino's playing, it's almost like playing Levi Colwill at left-back and Ben Chilwell as a left winger. So then it's like, well, they're both ahead of Marc Cucurella in terms of the pecking order for left-back. He prefers someone that's playing centre-back to be a left-back. Ian Maatsen has also started, well, he played pre-season really, really well. And I think Chelsea fans would probably like to see him there as well. So it's just the options that Chelsea have in that position, hence why they let Lewis Hall go to Newcastle alone and an obligation to buy, because the options just are too much at the moment in that left-back spot. He didn't have a great season last season, but no Chelsea player had a great season by their own standards. And what I would say is that you don't just lose your ability. He was Brighton's player of the season and he was so brilliant at Brighton as well. I think a fresh start would do him good. What I would say about Marc Cucurella is he's so positive all the time. He's one of the most likeable men in football. He always, even last season when you'd go down to Cobham, people would say how Marc Cucurella was the one trying to lift the spirits. He was making everyone laugh and he still does that whenever you go down to Cobham. He's always the joker and you want to see him playing football. You want to see him get back to the Marc Cucurella that we saw at Brighton. And I believe that going somewhere, whether that is Man United or not, I just think getting regular playing time would be perfect for him right now.
OK, we've got some news reaching us regarding Matheus Nunes. As you might well expect, given the fact that he's on strike, he is not going to take part in Wolves' game against Blackpool tonight in the EFL Cup. As of now, Wolves haven't received a new bid from Manchester City for him. A reminder, the player hasn't turned up for training this week, so Nunes not going to be involved for Wolves tonight against Blackpool in the EFL Cup. Quick update as well from West Ham today. They remain in talks with Corinthians over the signing of forward Yuri Alberto. We are told it's a problematic deal to do, complicated by the number of representatives and intermediaries involved. Initial talks as well have taken place with Jesse Lingard and his representatives over a short-term deal. You remember that Lingard has been training with the first-team squad at West Ham over the summer, primarily to keep his fitness up. We know that he's actually impressed quite a lot of the West Ham staff there with his fitness levels, with his ability, with his quality. So we can now say that initial talks have been held with Jesse Lingard and his representatives over a potential short-term deal.